Welcome to this week's episode of Princess Interrupted, the podcast. I'm Allison Ziggy, and today I am joined by the most special guest ever. Please give a warm welcome to Marissa Bing. I can't say enough good things about this woman as a friend, the best astrologer I know, because she's so knowledgeable. Without further ado, hi, Marissa.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to talk with you.
I'm so excited you're here too. Marissa and I met to talk about this podcast, and we were supposed to talk for 30 minutes, and we're on the phone for 2 hours. You are in for a delightful treat. Marissa, would you do a little bit of an introduction of your background, how you know what you know in astrology?
My name is Marissa, and I stumbled upon astrology back in 2017 because my brother's fiance, they're newly engaged, introduced astrology charts, Astro Cafe, the generated interpretations to my brother. He sent it to me and I was mind blown at everything that I read. I was like, I know that I'm an Aries. Why is it telling me about Gemini stuff? And I resonate with everything that it's telling me about this. Because of being that Gemini rising, I was also very much like, but why? I was so curious of what's going on here that I started digging into it. And then it just turned into years of studying and researching. My whole goal is always to figure out the origin of why.
What's your big three?
I'm Aries sun, Sagittarius moon, and Gemini rising.
We've got to call out the ram in the room, which is the fact we are both Aries. For listeners who are curious, I am an Aries sun, Libra moon, Cancer rising. Marissa and I immediately bonded over our love of the sign Aries. It is Aries season at the time of this recording. For our listeners who are Aries or Aries in different spots, let's start it off with Aries. And we also included in the show notes a link that you can access if you are interested in downloading your charts.
I always suggest people go to astro.com because when you use regular apps or the more popular apps, they will provide you with a chart that is divided in a way that you can't control. What a lot of people don't know is that the way the charts are divided can be changed. And the interpretation can also be changed according to how it's divided. I prefer the equal house system. I know a lot of people prefer equal or traditional. Popular now is Placidus. There are different reasons for why people choose what they choose. Astro.com will give you the ability to decide how you want your chart divided versus just being given a division.
This is Astro.com. If you want to get your birth chart, go to free horoscopes. Then you're going to go to horoscope drawings and data. Then you're going to go to extended chart selection. When you go here, you're going to do your horoscope. You're going to do this as rounds. And then what Marissa's referring to is the house system. This house system says default. You're going to want to choose equal. You can have the start date is today. Then show the chart. Mine already had my birth data, so it loaded everything. This is the equal house system she's referring to.
No matter what, you're going to have a cross in your chart. You're going to have a horizontal line and a vertical line. Those placements will be consistent in every chart because those are angles that are there when you were born. But where your second house is, where your eighth house is, where your ninth house is, that can change. It can even change signs. It's not necessarily that it's more accurate. It's just that I have learned the equal house system and the whole house system are a good reflection of the person and who they are. And a lot of times it's the parts of them that we see that they don't necessarily see themselves. When you're giving a chart reading or when you're learning about yourself, it's a great way to see how people are seeing you and the parts of you that might be in your blind spot. Plus is really great for if you're trying to do electoral astrology, which means maybe you're looking at I want to get married on this date. Futuristic, if that makes sense.
Thank you for explaining that. You can look at where Aries is in your chart when we're talking about this sign. People might be like, I don't have any Aries in my chart. Is that true or is that a myth?
It's definitely a myth. And it's actually one of my favorite things when I hear people say, oh, I don't have this in my chart. I hate that sign. I'm like, no, you have it. Everyone has every single sign in their chart. Usually the sign that you like the least, there is probably a planet there that you're having to learn to integrate with.
The most challenging people can sometimes reflect a challenging aspect.
Or a part of you that you struggle with. I have Venus in the 12th house and it's Taurus. It's hard for me to capture because I'm a very masculine kind of person. When you get to know me, the 12th house is hard because of certain dynamics that are happening in my chart. Venus is a hard planet for me. When I meet people who are very Venusian, it's a struggle for me. And I realize it's because I have to learn how to embrace that part of me.
We talk about this with the subconscious mind and with shadow work. It's like these people represent the shadows, the parts of yourself that are less expressed.
Exactly.
Can we break down the house system?
Yeah, it can be a little complex because when we think of a chart, we know the chart is going counterclockwise from 9 to 8 to 7 to 6, all the way around. What the sun actually does, though, when you're born, is it's technically going up. We can think of the 12th house as the hidden house, but it's like the womb for your sprung to life, which is your first house. Your first house is how am I entering the world? But the 12th house is how am I preparing to enter into the world? It's the sign before your rising sign. It's at the 10 o'clock hour on the chart.
And the rising sign, that's where the house system starts then.
Your rising sign, depending on how the chart is divided, will always be in the first house.
And your rising sign is your first impression that you make to people.
It's how you enter the world. It's like the chicken and the egg, right?
The houses, and then the 12th house, it's the one right before the most expressed would be.
It's traditionally known as the house of hidden enemies. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean like people, right? It's the parts of ourselves that we usually struggle to fully integrate because it's a boundless house. It's ruled by Neptune. It's ruled by Pisces. It's very ethereal. I call it a very spiritual house. Usually it's an isolated house as well. It's known as the house of prisons and isolation. But when we think of those words, we have to think of them archetypally or the deeper symbolic meaning behind them, not the actual physical black and white prison. But what can you achieve in solitude? What happens in solitude? What do you experience in solitude? When we're with other people, there's a light shined upon all the parts of you. But when you're by yourself, there's no one to shine a light or reflect back to you. So how do you find those parts and integrate them? That's why the 12th house is kind of like the womb. You're not out there yet. No one sees you yet, but you're making your way.
It seems like astrology really builds upon itself and it has such an intricate story. It's all about kind of relations to one another, to our place in the universe, to the planet. What are some of your favorite ways to use astrology?
It's a really good question. I like to use it to understand and validate whatever is happening in my life, or if I've uncovered something new about myself. Maybe I learned a new trigger or a new fear or a new belief, or maybe I recognized a new pattern or habit, because we're always forever learning more about ourselves. I like to use it to validate what I'm experiencing and what I'm learning about myself or even other people. If someone's having a really hard time, I'll just take a look and try to see what kind of energies are occurring near or around them. We can better mitigate and move forward from heal.
I love that there's this almost duality of astrology. Today we're talking about equal houses and talking about birth charts and where planets are located within your own chart. And there's this other area where you can use it to relate to yourself in the world.
What I've uncovered, and this is one of my goals with astrology, is we grow up and lose ourselves because we have communities who tell us how to be. Friends teach us, family teaches us, and suddenly we don't know why we want what we want or even what we want. A lot of things that we actually enjoy, but we pushed away, we don't even know that we enjoy them until we learn more about ourselves. When I looked at my own chart, I was taken aback on certain things because I was like, that's not true for me. It caused me to investigate my life and to try different things and recognize you only know what you know. And until you learn something new, you don't know if you like it or don't. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely. The more you know about yourself, the less you judge yourself as you're going through things. So if you know yourself first and foremost, the questions of what you want to know about certain situations will inherently change.
It's also a great way to really learn. When I first started, I was looking at Placidus and I resonated with particular things. When I started looking at equal, there were a lot of things that I didn't necessarily resonate with, and I had to observe myself and actually see, how does this manifest? How does this look in my life? That also taught more and more information to me about me or about how I handle certain things.
That's a beautiful use of this. It seems like this has been a really big part of your self-discovery and stepping into purpose.
Definitely.
One of my favorite things about you is the way that you're able to teach astrology. You break down these complex ideas, but you do it in a way that's so tangible and helpful to people. With that, and talking about Aries, what are some things that you'd like to share about how Aries shows up? Maybe misconceptions?
One of the major stereotypes about Aries is how aggro we are. Funny when I encounter someone who knows only the pop astrology stuff, and then I'm like, oh, I'm an Aries, and it confuses people because people will be like, you're an Aries? And I'm like, you obviously don't understand Aries, but also you don't know me yet.
I always guess wrong when I try to guess people's sun signs.
When people will be like, guess my sun sign. And I'm like, sweetie, you have 10 planets, you have 12 signs, you have angles. Am I talking to their rising sign right now? Am I talking to their moon?
I love the intricacies.
Aries is commonly stereotyped as very aggressive. There is a reason for the stereotypes. Scorpio is misunderstood. Virgo is misunderstood. A lot of these signs are misunderstood due to the fact that we're focused on the extremity. Those stereotypes are just missing a lot of context, which is the whole picture. The reason Aries has this aggressive stereotype is because each sign is here with a major purpose. One of Aries' major purpose is to declare. And when you declare something, people will agree or disagree. And if they disagree, you have a confrontation on your hands. And it's up to Aries to decide what they're going to do at that point. Are they going to flee? Are they going to fight? Stephen Forrest has a really great picture that he paints where he says you're walking down a dark alley. It's late at night. You're just trying to get to your car. You hear these footsteps slowly creeping up behind you. And then suddenly you turn around and there's a person with a weapon and they're like, give me your wallet. That is kind of Aries' battleground where they have to choose, do I fight or do I run in this very moment? Which is why Aries usually are very quick to confront because they've gone through enough situations where they had to learn the benefits of hiding and the benefits of fighting. And then they can measure tactically if they should actually go forward or flee. It is a cardinal sign. And so cardinal signs are very initiative and they take action. Aries is not consistent. But it is the firecracker. It's very quick to burst. And when it bursts, it's huge. And that's its energy level. And that's why Aries has a ton of energy. It is that first sign. It is the birth. It is I'm the baby screaming to the world that I am here when I am born. It is a sign of pioneering because Aries is not necessarily a follower. They're the leaders. But they're not necessarily there to lead according to what everyone expects. They will pioneer into their own avenue. They don't care if you follow them or not because they've decided what they wanted. They declared, and now they're going to go in that direction and you cannot change their mind. Once they have decided, they're going to go. There is a level of stubbornness there. People will agree or disagree and will follow along or they won't follow along. They're known for being very independent. The archetype specifically is known for all of that and for being leaders in that kind of way, which is different from the Leo leader, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because it's passion, right? It's heat. When you have heat, there's a lot of energy and Aries does not care how you take it because they're not focused on you. Their word is I am, right? Usually Aries will start something with I am feeling, I am doing, I am thinking. But that's what they're here to do. They're here to explore what it means to manifest. They are manifesting.
Absolutely. And you brought up a good point that I was thinking about from pop astrology too, is I look at these pop astrology and it's like Aries compatibility. And it's like, always look for another fire sign. In my experience, I've dated a lot of Sagittarius and it hasn't really gotten me anywhere.
That's definitely one of the larger myths or misconceptions that are consistently out there. Pop astrology kind of gives this fatalistic or deterministic view of the signs or what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to be. There are certain branches of astrology that can lend itself toward futuristic things, but nobody can look at your chart and immediately know exactly everything about you. We have no idea how these energies manifested for you. We don't know if you were born in the Middle East or if you were born in America, if you were born as a woman or a man, right? Hitler and Charlie Chaplin, they have the same chart, exact everything, detailed. They were born at the same minute, everything, but they grew up in different environments. And so it manifested differently.
Wow, I've never heard that before.
You can recognize certain qualities, but how they chose to
express
those qualities, how it all manifested, very different.
Wow, that is so fascinating and interesting to think that the chart does only tell part of the picture. It seems like it's a story and there was a completely different story. That's amazing. Can you use astrology to determine compatibility and things like that?
So I definitely suggest looking at it for identifying where the struggles will be and where the balance and harmony will be. And how you feel about all of that is going to determine if you want to be with this person because relationships are, of course, a two-way street. One of the missed parts when it comes to looking at compatibility, a lot of people focus on look for your moon, look for your 7th house, look for your Venus or whatever. But we miss the tiny details. How are these planets talking to each other? That can indicate if you have a lot more of challenging energies in your chart or a lot more benefiting energies in your chart. I have a lot of challenging energies in my chart, which can speak to myself and my experiences, but it also speaks to what I'm most familiar with. And I'm most familiar with being challenged, with consistently growing, a growth mindset, having somebody who keeps me moving forward. That means that I cannot necessarily be with someone super complacent, even though my Venus is in Taurus. It's
Me
like
too.
the most chill sign. I cannot do that. I can't have that kind of energy. If you have a very chill chart, like my brother, him and his fiance are perfect because they both balance each other in that very relaxed, still energetic, but chill kind of energy.
How do you tell if you have a challenging or a chill chart? I can also show mine if it's good for examples, even if people don't have the same exact placements as me. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Do I have a challenging chart? I bet I do need someone who challenges me a little bit, but I don't necessarily want like a battleground of a relationship, you know?
Yeah, it looks like you do have a bit more of a challenge. First and foremost, if you look at the bottom where you can see that random table where there's like symbols in a triangle going downward, where you can see like the square and stuff, those are your aspects. And those will tell us how the planets are talking to each other. Are they getting along? Are they not getting along? If you have a lot of planets that are challenging one another, which is represented by the square,
I would take it's red. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would say the giant red squares. So if you pull your chart up and you have a lot of red squares, got a little bit of challenges on your path, which is probably most people listening to a podcast like this, I'd venture to say. Right? Because I mean, people who want growth and challenge,
right?
you become a master of challenge because you've had to face it.
Exactly.
You can either feel like a victim and be like, life is hard, or you can be like, all right, I'm going to use this to become the best me and step into my life's purpose and make it bigger.
Exactly. You're probably right. The squares are probably the most challenging when it comes to it all. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want someone who's going to put you in an arena and consistently fight with you at all. I always think of squares as you're building that muscle. You have to pick up that heavy weight. It sucks to pick it up, but it makes you stronger. When you're in it, you're like, wow, this is great. I'm growing. I'm feeling better. These will indicate a lot about you personally, but it also represents what you're more familiar with. And you probably do need somebody who's going to push you forward, keep you going. If you start to be very like lackadaisical or whatever, they're going to be that one that's like, are you sure you should be doing that? And you're going to hate it, but you're also going to be like, thank you for telling me, like waking me up from that.
Yeah, I could see that. One of the things that's most important to me in a partner is somebody who's really supportive, like somebody who encourages me, and me being my best self is continuing to go after new things, new forms of expression, like constantly finding my edge.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Exactly. That makes a lot of sense with it too. You do have the triangles, those are called trines, and those are benefiting kinds of energies. There's also tiny little asterisks, those are sextiles. Like you have one with your sun and Saturn.
Yeah,
It's
it's
that one.
blue.
That's a sextile. So that's a benefiting one as well too. So if you have those kinds of energies will tell you where you prefer the harmony, right? You can look at these and see very generically, obviously, but for example, your sun sign has that trine next to Jupiter. It's where the triangle is underneath the sun. And so you probably want somebody who reflects your vision. You probably want somebody who is optimistic and positive because that's what you have in your life. And that's very familiar for you. And so you don't necessarily want someone to challenge you.
I'm laughing. I'm like, yeah, the universe threw me a bone. You have all these challenges, but you're going to be really positive in the pursuit.
What you appreciate. It's what you need. You don't want to challenge.
I could not be with somebody who's like starts to poke holes in my vision or be like, this is why it can't work. Like I don't need that.
Yeah, exactly. You can even see right below the triangle is that asterisk, that sextile. If you go all the way to the right, that symbol right there is Saturn. Whenever Saturn's involved, there's always a bit of hardship because it's known for that. I personally love Saturn. It has a bad name. What you just described shows this. If you have a challenging aspect with Saturn, then you're probably used to that drill sergeant. But what you just said was, I want someone who's going to help me stay in check, but they're going to do it kind. You have a softer relationship with Saturn.
I think that's good. Not that squares equal bad and asterisks equal good, but this is interesting. So these are the kind of things that you'll look at within people's charts pertaining to relationships and things like this. What other things do you point out? I bet people come here and they're like, what kind of sign am I meant to be with? That falls into like fortune telling, right?
It does. What I will say about the chart when it comes to what kind of person, it's not going to tell you who, and it's not going to tell you what sign, but it is going to tell you what you enjoy It's going to indicate what you likely enjoy, and it will tell you the kinds of qualities you're probably drawn toward. It'll also show you your own red flags.
The red flags that I have?
Yeah.
Oh, it shows you my red flags?
Show you your own red flags. Yeah, exactly. When I started really learning about this, I started looking at my chart and recognizing my red flags in my chart. And I was like, cool.
If I want to put myself on the spot, what are red flags?
Definitely one that's a bit harder. I actually have this too. Anybody who has a Taurus Venus and they're born with a Scorpio Pluto, they usually have this. So there's a key number of us, but we're only born from a certain time period though. So you have Venus and Taurus, and if you see there's a red line drawing directly down to Pluto in the Scorpio, your fifth house. Pluto is a hard planet because it is the planet of our shadow. It's the parts of us, it's our wound is what it really is at the end.
It's like the underworld, the darkness.
Yeah. You can think of Persephone, right? It's a very Venusian Pluto kind of experience. Usually when there's a Venus-Pluto kind of vibe, there's attachment, control, obsession, things like that, depending on the rest of their chart too, like how obsessed. And what happens, and you might have actually experienced this yourself, if you encounter somebody who has a Pluto touching your own Venus as well, it creates this karmic connection and it results in this toxic type of obsession.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally. Yeah, I can see that. It's explosive, but it's like dark. And
like Persephone should leave and she's not leaving even when she's free, right? She's attached, but then she also is technically being held captive, right? It's this like weird red flaggy, like, girl, what are you doing?
Yes, that makes sense. And that's something that I definitely struggled with earlier on. It would be really hard to let go of relationships, even if so toxic. And even if it wasn't even a relationship I was still in, but it's like ruminating on past situation.
Yeah.
It used to be really hard to let go of something like that.
Yes, exactly. That is definitely the capture between Pluto and Venus. I just call it the lover's quarrel. Whenever I see it, I'm like, oh, girl, I get it.
That's totally accurate. That's something to watch out for. Are there things that you can outgrow in your chart?
Everything. You're meant to overcome all of the lower qualities, all of the challenges. A good example, if we're looking at your chart, I have this too. Yours is a bit wider, but you have a Sun square Neptune. This is a hard aspect because basically Neptune, a planet that is very foggy and is hard to see, can cause a lot of confusion. It can cause a lot of dreaminess and imagination. And what it can also often result in is possibility of getting stuck on creating what you want to create. Building that foundation can be a little hard because we're lost in the clouds. We have to somehow get ourselves grounded and get to the manual work instead of being lost in the ethereal. I'm certain that you have obviously grown out of that, but it probably was very hard and you probably had to do it again.
Yes, 100%. This showed up most prevalently in my business where I had this huge vision where if you asked me on day one, I knew exactly what I wanted to create. But if I told another person, it sounded like I was speaking a completely different language that did not exist. And they're like, girl, what are you on? It was so hard for me to do one thing at a time so that other people could catch up with what I was doing as opposed to saying all of it at once.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest challenges I faced. It continues to get clearer and clearer, but the vision has never changed that much. It's always been the same through the trial and error and through the repetition. It's like then you break through the other side and you break free of these. It's almost like a karmic pattern blueprint in a sense.
I love that you brought that up because this also kind of segues into something that a lot of people get confused or concerned about. And it's the idea that they don't have planets in certain houses.
Okay.
Assume that if I don't have a planet there, then that's just not going to happen for me, right? Like if I don't have my planet in the 7th house, I'm just not going to get married.
And the houses are like, if you look at your chart, it's like these are the numbers. So this would be the 7th. So do I get married 4 times?
That's what it meant.
Just to perpetuate the misconception. You heard it here first.
Yes, 4 times. And the degrees will tell you how many years.
Yeah, I'm like, bring it on. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to get married 4 times. I'm not claiming that. That's not.
When we have a planet in a house, it's just telling us that in this incarnation, we are meant to focus and learn in these areas. I love that you're a dating coach. Obviously, you're way more than that, but you have a lot of focus here and you can coach on it because you probably went through a lot of learning, growth through it.
Absolutely. There are planets stacked in that 7th house and some heavier energies too.
Yeah. Definitely. With Saturn there too, there probably was some like hard lessons within that as well.
You could say that. Make sure to read my book, Princess Interrupted. Yeah, a lot of lessons.
Yeah. Wherever you have planets is where you're meant to grow and learn. It's not even just that. There's so many other parts, depending on how the chart is set up, can indicate what areas you're here to really hone in and focus on and learn from and develop. It's cool because I don't know if you've ever had an Akashic record reading, but if you ever get one, I have found that usually the themes that they bring up, I can see them in my chart.
Wow.
Like, dang it, why didn't you learn it then, girl?
A lot of these things are just different interpretations of the same. You look at a human design chart, it's still energies based on the time you were born. So it's going to reflect the same information just in different ways, and different people resonate with different interpretations.
Yeah, exactly. And I also love that you brought up that it's a reflection, because I think that's something that maybe a lot of people don't realize, is that the chart is just a reflection of what was going on in the sky the very second that you were born. We have to understand the law of correspondence, as above, so below, and cosmology, that everything's like
A mirror.
reflecting one another. The chart's not telling you who to be. It's just saying this was the energy at that time that was imprinted upon you. You're the manifested form of this chart in your own way with regard to how you were brought up and the society you lived in and the community.
It's like a sky manual. If
Yeah.
there's stuff going on and it's chaos, it's like, what is going on here? Ah, I see you, seventh house planets. You make so much sense. And look at these red lines, squares, complications. It provides understanding. And so you can take the pressure off of yourself to need to be perfect and have it all figured out, and just realize that sometimes these challenges are part of molding you into who you're meant to be.
Exactly. You're just developing continuously. And that's when you hear the scary word of Saturn returns and stuff. Saturn is always returning. It actually consistently is going around. Have you embraced your chart? Have you embodied your chart? Have you grown within the energies that are imprinted upon you?
Another term that gets thrown around are these retrogrades. At the time of this recording, we do have a Mercury and a Venus retrograde. You log on TikTok, people are like, don't date, exes are coming back. Like, it's chaos out there. Let's debunk what's going on here.
Retrogrades definitely have a lot of confusion around them, and it fits because that is retrograde, right?
Yeah. You're like, that's their whole thing.
That's their stick. Yeah. So they're doing a good job.
They love that reputation. Cool. Good to know.
First, I guess we can mention Mercury retrograde, because it is different from Venus retrograde, is when it appears as if a planet is moving backwards. It's not moving backwards technically, astronomically. It's just moving slower. And so when we're watching the sky, it looks like it's kind of like passing a slow car. It looks like the car is going backwards.
It's an optical illusion.
Exactly. But of course, our ancestors, they didn't know what was going on. So they assumed it was moving backwards. And it actually fits really well, because when we go into a retrograde, we're technically going into an unconscious experience. The picture I usually like to give for Mercury retrograde, first and foremost, it's not scary. It's not apocalyptic. It's been happening since before we were born. It's been happening when the dinosaurs were here. It's just what happened. When we have a Mercury retrograde, is as if you put on these really dark shades, you put on these really huge noise cancellation headphones, and you're just vibing. Because when you can't see and when you can't hear, you go inward. And when you go inward, you're lacking awareness, because you're not really looking. You can't really see anything. You can't really hear anything. So you're not really aware of anything. That's why particularly Mercury retrograde gets that name for accidents and don't sign contracts and things like that. It's not necessarily because the world is like, this is a doomed period. It's because you are likely so in your head that you're not being aware of what's happening. You didn't read the fine print. You just skipped over it because you were distracted by something that was going on in your mind. One of my favorites, Melanie Reinhart, mentions that for Mercury retrogrades, they think of them as waking and sleeping. When we go to sleep, it's the time for our unconscious to actually play and get a break from always being, not that we're super aware humans, being as aware as we are, right? That's kind of the same thing for Mercury retrogrades. It's a chance for everything that has happened the past few months that has been laden in the unconscious to come forward. That's where we get the idea of your ex is now in your head, probably because you didn't process something related to your ex, or that random thing from the past has come back up, probably because you didn't necessarily process, and now your psyche is ready to process it. What's coming up for you to understand and to process and then take action from there.
The visual that just came up for me is it's like you're clearing out your recycling bin and it's the final check of do you actually want to permanently delete this?
Yeah, that's a great one.
It's basically just like the closing out of karmic lessons. And there might be some validity in there, but more often than not, this energy's leaving.
Yeah, yeah. If it's time to go, it's time to go. That's why not every retrograde will cause for the same thing to come up. Not every person is impacted by every single retrograde. This retrograde is in Aries. But if you're a Taurus, you probably aren't really going to be hit by it unless you have a planet or something important in Aries. Pisces, you might not necessarily be hit by this directly. So you might not necessarily encounter that lack of awareness, but you are impacted because others are walking around you and they're not paying attention.
It's not like you're always playing the same role.
Exactly. You're either the character or you're the observer. You're bouncing between the two. This one is in Aries, which is great because it's in a fire sign. But now we're in the fire series. It's going to continue on through the fire series at this point now that we started it. Carl Jung was a huge astrologer as well, and he associated the fire energy with the intuitive function, which doesn't mean being psychic, but having a vision, living in the future. Bare room, and you're like, oh, what could be in here? It's like that intuitive function of this could go here, that could go there mindset. When we have a retrograde, basically it's causing all of our old patterns and expectations to stop and break them apart. With that fire energy, we have that impulse, the initiative to start something. And then we can't start it. We just keep hitting this wall and it gets us angrier and angrier. What happens when you're hitting a wall? Eventually you're going to burst. When you burst, you're no longer in that stuck place. So you're basically forcing growth. If during this retrograde you are consistently hitting a wall, don't take it as that's the sign. Take it as what is this forcing me to grow toward? How can I develop? What potential is growing from this experience of hitting this wall?
I love that. Basically, nothing's a sign to give up unless you don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
No external sign is going to say this isn't meant for you. At the end of the day, that's not an external job. If you have a mission and there's something you're pursuing and something you want, no sign out there is going to tell you to give up. That's not how signs are meant to be interpreted.
Exactly.
Running into roadblocks, it's guiding you and it's forcing you to transform in almost that phoenix energy. It's not meant for me, burn it away. There might have been easier ways to go about making changes, but I don't know, maybe that's just the Aries way of just going all in and just deciding there's no
an all-in sign. It is the sign that jumps all in without hesitation. It's the most impulsive sign.
Yes, I'm intuitive, but impulsive. Another thing that you've talked about before that I know we've talked about is you said that one of the misconceptions is that your 7th house is tied to your relationships, but in reality, the 8th house has bearing on it. Could you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few houses for anybody who wants to get a better look at what they're attracted to and what they're drawn to. The 5th house is known as the house of love. It constantly has like the house of love associated with it. It's connected to Leo, and Leo has the big heart image. A lot of books it'll be called the house of love, and it's definitely a misconception too. In general, houses are more often than not misunderstood. It's definitely one of those areas you have to truly study. The 5th house has that name primarily because it's actually really the house of like the inner child. It's the house of things that we enjoy. It's the house of like recreations and creativity, things like that. Obviously, when you connect with somebody who enjoys what you enjoy or who, you know, appreciates your inner child or loves on your inner child or lights your inner child up, you're going to have that resonance of a connection with one another. And then you're likely going to have great date ideas that make you feel drawn toward that person because there's resonance there. That's where we get that name for the 5th house. And that's one of our houses that has to do with relationships or compatibility. You particularly have a Scorpio 5th house.
And there's Pluto in there.
There's in there too.
Oh my gosh, the gang's all here.
Scorpio is one of my favorite signs and it's very misunderstood, but it is a sign that is very deep and it's also a sign associated with power. It's a sign that's here to understand power, what it means to be subordinate and what it means to be powerful. That can speak to things that you enjoy. You probably enjoy having deep connections with people. Whenever you do anything, you're not going to waste time. You're going to be very determined or specific about, okay, I'm going into this and I'm doing this for a reason. And there's a connection here. I consider Scorpio a very vulnerable sign because I can have a paper cut and be like, ow, that hurt. I can do it to a Scorpio and their arm will fall off because it's that deep. Everything is that deep for them.
Oh my
because they feel
gosh.
that intensely.
Wow.
That's one of the blessings and curses of Scorpio, is that they're here to go that deep and feel that extreme and uncover all of the truths about everything. That's what they're here for. That's power. You know what I mean?
I'm just laughing because I'm like, these are really extreme love placements. I mean, I'm passionate about this topic, but I'm like, oh my gosh, this is painting some context, but man, this is deep.
That's why I started giggling. I was like, oh, you're Scorpio.
I swear, I just looked and I'm like, oh, yeah, there it is.
That also could mean that like you really enjoy talking or uncovering, or I don't know, whoever it is that you're spending time with. Even think right now, you're like, let's myth bust. Let's uncover. Right? It's
Yeah.
you enjoy to do.
It is. Even like with my like closest relationships, right? Like I like to go deep. I'm like esoteric. I like to connect on deep levels.
Yeah. Vulnerability. Yeah.
I guess I love not just romanticizing relationships, but like writing about them and like turning them into poetry and art and just like these like deep expressions.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Not much that's surface level. But yeah, okay. So this is not necessarily, fifth house is not necessarily a marker of love, but it's a form of love because it's your inner child.
It's like you're dating. It can
Okay.
tell you like what you like to do when you're first connecting with somebody, or when you're getting to know somebody, or when you're like in that moment with them. We also have our 11th house, which is where your Taurus is. That is the house of friendships and wishes. The reason that it's associated with wishes is because usually when we're joining a group or when we're volunteering for a cause, we usually have like-mindedness. You might actually notice that people who you associate with or you find yourself often connected to have some element of the Taurus archetype, that characteristic to them. Something about them has, maybe it's something related to the Taurus archetype. You're going to find that there's a commonality between you and people within that, if that makes sense. I bring this house up is because you usually make friends with people that you're in groups with. Usually through your friends is where you connect with somebody. If you're going to be with somebody who has a mindset that you can vibe with, who has a vision similar to your own, or at least supports your own.
I think about that in terms of someone who fits in the larger group of my life, like the greater perspective, like they could be around the different people. I think traditionally this would be like somebody you meet at work or at school. Well, I don't know, work might be a different house or school or something like that, right? Or is that
Yeah, like a cause or
like a club? Like,
yes, exactly. Like a club. It's also like the house of friendships too, because of the fact that usually you make friends from people who share similar visions, similar, ideals in this world. It makes sense if you have a Venus ideal for this world because you're really into helping people achieve self-love. And Taurus is like I call it like the most earthly, I call it like the sign of the human because it's very much like embracing the self. Taurus is very much like, I burp, I fart, I do everything, right? I am human. That is very Taurus. And you're very big on embrace yourself. And you like people who support that kind of experience.
Absolutely. How would this relate to someone else's chart? The fifth house and then the 11th house.
Tell you about the people that you usually associate with and the things that you like to do with you connect with. Then we get into our 7th house, which is funny because a lot of people call this the marriage house, right? But what a lot of people probably don't know is that traditionally it's called the house of enemies.
This is like my most stacked house, like planet rolling deep in planets.
We really, really like to call this one the house of the other. Part of why I do that is because directly across from that is your rising sign. Your first house is the house of you. It is the house of what do I want? Whereas the 7th house is opposite. It is the house of having to figure out, well, what do you want? Right? How much do I assert myself versus how much do I cooperate with you? It's the dynamic between Aries and Libra for certain. One of my favorite quotes is also from Melanie Reinhart, where she talks about how the 7th house teaches us who am I when I'm on my own and when I'm in a relationship. The reason that this house has the name for relationships is due to the fact that it is the house of the other. And the relationship can be work, it can be romantic, it can be friendship, but it's basically the house of somebody else or the house of focusing on someone other than yourself. In order to focus on someone else, you have to value them to continue that relationship overall. When we look at the descendant, that's the DSC. It's not listed there, I suppose, but where you see AC, that would be a DC. DSC, which is the descendant.
Yeah.
And that's an angle, again, also opposite. I always consider this house as the shadow part of us. If your rising sign is how you're expressing yourself to the world, opposite of that is what you're keeping secret, what you're hiding. Your descendant is conjunct Uranus and kind of a far conjunction, but to Neptune as well. So that can give you a lot of context as well. But basically, I consider the descendant, the seventh house, your shadow part of you. It's the parts of you that you reject. And depth psychology teaches us that we're always attracting us. We're attracting ourselves. But usually when we grow up, we learn, of course, like we talked about earlier, community and society and friends and family will teach you what's acceptable, what's not. Then you shove away the parts of you that you don't accept, and that goes into your shadow. But we're always seeking to be whole. And if we're seeking to be whole, then that means we need to reintegrate the shadow parts of ourselves. But we can't do that if we don't know what we've shoved down. So you need another person to be that mirror to you, to shine that light. And the only way they can do that is if they embody those parts. Typically, what I've found is that the seventh house will help us understand the parts of ourselves that we're probably trying to push away. As a result, we're seeking it in somebody else. We're attracting it in somebody else. We're attracted to it to create that wholeness until we can reintegrate those parts. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I do this a lot with clients, and it's really the shadow. It really is just the subconscious shadow. And if you aren't able to see it in yourself, sometimes you'll manifest another person who has this quality so that you can heal it, because you would have never accepted it within yourself. And this goes in terms of admiring people. It can even be, my friend calls it, she studies Carl Jung, a golden shadow. Over idealize someone else's qualities because you're not recognizing this within yourself. And it's hard for you to see it within yourself. Sometimes it's easier for us to heal through other people.
Exactly.
Because it's so repressed within us.
Yes, I love that so much. Also, it's possible too for you to not like those things too, where you see people embody them and you're like, why are you embodying it? But you still are so drawn to them for some reason too, which I always find is fun.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like you can't look away because it's intriguing when somebody's so different.
Yeah, exactly. With regard to your DSC or your descendant as well, one other thing to note is that it's hard to see on this chart. So I wish, I could tell people, but I know where your descendant is because where it says AC, that's your rising. We consider the number 7. So you have a 7-degree rising, and your descendant will always be opposite. So you have a 7-degree Capricorn, and that is really close to Uranus and Neptune. Whenever you have a planet that's really close to your descendant, usually that's considered a blind spot within yourself. So usually, because it's a blind spot, you need somebody else. You actually need somebody else to help you see it, to help you uncover it.
What would the blind spot be?
For you, it would be Uranus and Neptune. You probably have uncovered it by now, but it could be embracing your innovative side, your eclectic side. You are very eclectic. You're very fun, and especially because you have an aspect with the sun. But I wonder if for a while you pushed it away, or maybe you were like, I don't know how to be my own eclectic version. I don't know how to be my own innovative person. I don't know how to accept those random bursts of it and actually hold them as like gold, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I would say, and this, you can see this through my brand and what I've created and what I really encourage people to lean into, but confidence for me was the hardest thing to cultivate, to really believe, to trust that. And when you're eclectic, you're leading, not necessarily just leading a charge, but you're daring to be different.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was really hard to embrace. And it was something that I definitely had to fight against, was trying to be the same. I just wanted to fit in and belong, but it was that was never what I was truly meant to do anyway.
Yeah, I don't know for certain, but based on your chart, it would seem that others, and again, it doesn't have to be romantic. It could be like friendship or work relationships too, that kind of helped you find or help. Maybe they challenged, maybe they actually encouraged you, either way.
This is a really important point, and I'm really happy that you just said that, because in our society, there's been such an overemphasis on romantic love as the way. And so even reading this and seeing the friendships, those relationships are just as valuable as romantic partnerships. And society doesn't always make it seem that way, but it's not like if you don't have a partner, this isn't relevant. This is good information to know in general, to be okay, good friendships are people who celebrate me in my differentness and celebrate me authentically. It's all related, If you just hyperfixate on the partner, where are they? What sign are they? Where are they here? You could be miserable spending your whole life trying to figure that out,
that really hits the nail on the seventh house. Again, a lot of people assume it's the house of marriage or whatever, but it's just the house of the other. And that can be friendship. It can be romantic. It can be any of that. That's also why it's traditionally called the house of the enemy, because it's not, again, it's not literal. It's, what does that mean symbolically? You're the enemy to yourself, right? We always say, I'm my biggest enemy. And so you need somebody else to help you love on those parts or recognize the value of those parts. The last house that I find to be the most actual representative of a romantic relationship is actually the eighth house, which is directly above it. And you have an Aquarius sun, which is fun. The eighth house is confusing because if you look up online, you're going to see like the eighth house represents sex and death. Our society has just made sex so taboo that anytime anyone sees that word, they hyperfixate on it. And they're like, my son's in the eighth house, so you know I'm sexual, right? Or Scorpio is associated with sex.
Yeah.
Oh, so that means I'm super sexual. One of my mentors is like, last time I checked, majority of people who are not asexual really like sex. So it's not just like a one sign.
Yes. Thank you for debunking that.
It has that name. We focus on it. But again, we have to look at the symbology of sex and death. What happens when you have sex with someone you care about? It is a deep merging with that person. It is a deep unification. It is a selfless and selfish give and take, right? It is this like deep, deep, deep connection that's happening at the moment. It's not just like I'm with this other person, but now I'm actually merging with this person. Now I'm actually like engaging on a deeper level. I'm being vulnerable and I have to trust that this person is going to accept me for who I am. There's just a lot more like depth to it. And Erin Sullivan or Melanie Reinhart, one of them, they say something about how the eighth house is the real emotional and erotic depth of a relationship. It has nothing to do with being socially acceptable. It is just being with that person. I kind of giggle and we focus so much on the seventh house because that could be anybody. You're not having sex with your friends. You're not having a deep, erotic, emotionally depth kind of relationship with your worker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sex is unique to your relationships.
Exactly. Romantic relationship. Yeah.
There's nothing going on there, right? Or no?
So obviously I'm just kidding.
I'm like, what does it mean? Where are all the planets now?
I'm so sorry. In this lifetime, you're just not going to have any.
Like dry spell, or what does this mean?
Obviously, it does not mean like a dry spell, and it does not mean any of that. I would say that it's very likely you do not need any major lessons on how to have a deep emotional relationship with somebody. Probably are learning how to connect with another person, how to find the compromise, how to be yourself and also being with them while still being yourself. Mostly though, it's more about you. How are you embracing yourself? It goes so on brand with you. Like you're so big on self-love. That took a lot of learning and you probably had to go through a lot of experiences, that seventh house really lighting up over and over again. With that empty eighth house, I think it's just indicating that you don't need to learn. You are going to receive that love when it comes. You are going to receive that depth when it comes. I personally struggle with receiving all that stuff. And you probably are open to it. You don't need to learn anything there. Right? Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I'm still laughing that you called it an empty house. That is what it is. Like my lessons aren't really around an inability to connect deeply.
Exactly.
That's an area where I do really pride myself on that. I do have the ability to go deep and really honor that connection.
Yeah, that's really beautiful too. So many struggle with that. I started giggling to myself because I was like, wow, her chart is so on brand with her brain.
That's great. When there's empty houses, it just means there's not that many lessons there.
It's not a playground. That's what I call them. Whenever you have a planet in a house, that is the playground that you're there to develop that planet or learn about those lessons. In your first house, you have Chiron. Your biggest wound was related to probably feeling like you're cared for, feeling like you're protected, feeling like you're basically almost like feeling like you're loved, like you matter in a way. Feeling that way can be anywhere in your chart, but when you're confronted with it in your first house, which is related to embracing who you are in this world in a way, like how you are, you come off to other people and whatnot. Where the planets are is just going to indicate what topical playground are you going to develop or encounter these energies in.
This was incredible. I loved diving into the chart with you, and hopefully at home you were able to look at your chart and dive in on your own and see some of these houses and if you have planets there and some of the placements. Marissa, any final words of wisdom, anything you'd like to share?
Well, the major thing is that your chart is not necessarily determining you. You get to determine what you do with those energies. If there is something in your chart that you're not a fan of, you get to decide, how do I embrace this and how do I embody this in a way that aligns with me?
Mm.
I would never put weight on going online and just reading about a sign and being like, that's not me, because it's possible that the planet that's in the sign is having a conversation with another planet and that is influencing how
Mm.
it's showing up in the world.
You are so incredibly knowledgeable on this topic. Where can people find you and connect with you if they gained insight from this?
Yeah, I have a website. It's wildflowersinthesky.com. That is where I have offerings to give readings or look at your chart.
I just have learned so much from you. Definitely make sure to go follow Marissa, check out her website. She is so incredibly gifted and skilled with astrology, and she has a lot of wisdom to share on this topic. So I'm excited to see what you create and how things continue to build out for you. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming on the
you.
podcast. Thank you so much for joining this week's episode of Princess Interrupted, the podcast.